Hello everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I'm going to be going over Gym Leader Challenge updates from Temporal Forces. Temporal Forces is the next expansion, and it is coming in around a week from the release of this video. I'm not 100% sure of my upload schedule, but it should be around a week from today, which is super sick. And it's a really, I think it's a big set. At the very least, it has really good cards, specifically for standard, but GLC, it's got some really cool stuff as well. A quick rundown of GLC for those of you who don't know what it is. It's a Pokemon TCG format where you have a 60 card deck and a lot of normal rules, except you can only have one of each card. So you can have like one evolution lines. You can only have one type of Pokemon, so monotype, and so that means you need to kind of look at each type within a vacuum. And then lastly, it is all single prizers and non-rule box cards in Pokemon. So yeah, no Pokemon EXs, so obviously won't be talking about those in today's video. Also, I'm not going to be focusing too much time on pre-evolutions. I don't think there are any massive ones. Occasionally, there's a pre-evolution that means that it really gives you access to a lot of new Pokemon due to like the evolution rules of the format, but I don't think that's the case in today's video with Temporal Forces. I know in the next set there's a an Applin that's Dragon type, which is super sick, allowing you to, and it's the first one of that type, meaning that you can use what do you have? Yeah, you have Flapple, you have Appleton, and then there's a Diplin and Hydrapple, although Hydrapple has not been revealed yet. I have no idea when that's coming, or if it'll even get a single prizer, but that's not for today's video. Today we're talking about Pokemon. We're not talking about the trainers today. I feel like they'll get their own video. But yeah, let's just hop into things. I don't know if I'm going to cover all the types, but I'll certainly cover some. The title will say, and the description will as well. But starting things off, Scyther, nothing too crazy here, but we can skip all the way till this Breloom, not very good. Grass, Colorless 120. We do have this moderately interesting Resilient Roserade. If they're hit into and damaged, your opponent's active is now poisoned. This Roserade also does 70 stops retreat, but there's a really good Roserade as well. Yeah, Roserade's the evolution. Let me find it. Not all grass lists play it, but I think a lot do. Here we go. It just lets you like search your deck for any card and put it into your hand on play, which is kind of busted. So yeah, I don't think this other Roserade is anywhere near as good. This one's kind of like terrible as an attacker, but yeah. Also, this Roserade I believe is the same as a Whimsicott, but let me double check on that. Yep. So there's like the Whimsicott's good, the Roserade's good. Long story short, it's not. You're not replacing that Roserade, I can't imagine. We do have this Turtwig, which is kind of interesting. It's 80 HP and takes 20 less from attacks, which is a lot of HP. The current Turtwig is, I honestly am not super familiar with Pre-Evolutions in a lot of the decks, but I mean, Turtwig is like insane. Apparently, it's this one, which can accelerate one. It's okay. There's a new card, Buddy Buddy Poffin, which we'll talk about in not today's video. It's a trainer, but it's good to have 70 HP, but it's only a one of, so. Then this Chartwig is really tanky. It's essentially 100 HP basic, which is really nice, especially on a basic that evolves into a stage 2. That's like almost unheard of. That being said, it's obviously nothing insane in what it does on its own. But yeah, this Grottle you never play. This Shaman is useless. This Whimsicott's kind of interesting. I don't think there's a Whimsicott really played in Grass GLC too much. When you play this to evolve, you may heal your active Grass Pokemon completely and then discard all energy from it. This is usable. Grass is a bit of a tanky type, it's arguably the most tanky type, which is really good. Or at least it's Metal's pretty tanky as well, but Metal's not as good as Grass. But it's useful. The Cheryl obviously is a card, and there are other cards like it. You can scoop up Whimsicott, but you could also just scoop up the damage Pokemon. So I don't think this card's particularly good, but certainly you could slot it in and really I was going to say surprise your opponent. You can't surprise them that much because it obviously is an evolution and there is no Forest of Giant Plants, which is because that's banned because it's broken. But yeah, this card is interesting. I don't think it's quite there. We have a Sawsbuck that lets you search for a stadium. As I said, Forest of Giant Plants is banned. That was really good, but you can't play it. I don't think this is quite good enough. Its attack as an attacker, it's not terrible, but certainly not that good. So I don't think it's quite there. We do have a Delmise. If you have any bench metal Pokemon, just 80 more, which you don't, because wait, actually, is there a dual type? I don't think there's a dual metal grass Pokemon. That seems highly unlikely. So yeah, Delmise is not going to be great here. We do have this Bramble Gas. So this Bramble Gas, in my opinion, is absurd. So it has 100 HP, but its ability for each prize your opponent has taken, this gets 50 more HP. I don't know how this interacts with prize cards getting put back. I don't really think that's a thing in GLC though. So, or standard either. But this is pretty absurd. So if your opponent's taken 4, which is pretty fair, um, which is like something that obviously happens, or even just 2. If they've taken 2 prizes, this Pokemon has 200 HP, which is a lot. But let's look at its attack here. Powerful Needles, 80 for you flip a coin. It's 80 per each heads. Flip a coin for each energy attached to this Pokemon. So you need a lot of energy. But if we take a look at Grass, um, we got ourselves just yeah, runs Rillaboom, runs Venusaur. This is very common. There's also Cherim, which you can play. It's not played as much, but it's very good. Um, yeah, so you get these Pokemon into play, and this accelerates to energy every turn. This doubles all the energy. So literally, your attached, use Rillaboom, have Venusaur, you have now 6 energy attached. So if you flip 3 heads, which is average, then you're one-shotting essentially everything in the format. Of course, the big thing is you could get unlucky, but there are ways to re-flip. There are a few. First of all, obviously there is a Viridian Forest, but I think is there a, no, yeah. So there's mostly Viridian Forest. There's a card as well, Trick Coin. I believe that's the card that lets you reflip. You can't stack them, but you know if you reflip, you should be okay. Even if you just have like 4 energy on, you should be okay. Because 2 heads is still 180. That's really good. So the damage output of this card is it's really good if you hit it. You don't need to be super lucky, and then its HP is super high. This card's like really good. In standard, it might not be quite good enough, but in GLC, it's gonna be more than enough. This card's absolutely bonkers. You can even use it to just kind of like wall your opponent a lot because after they've taken 5 prizes, you have 350 HP, which is just absurd. You can put on Luminous Cape as well to then have 450 HP. I mean, they're not one-shotting you. They're probably not two-shotting you. They might not be three-shotting you. So, yeah, that's pretty silly. Yeah, Bramble Gas is really powerful. I think this card is kind of broken. It's kind of fun though. It obviously is a little bit of setup, but it's certainly not that crazy. You look at Torterra, which is it is admittedly only 2 energy, but it's really tanky, but it's a stage 2. This is kind of like that, but it's a stage 1. And also you can keep her on your Grottle. Grottle has a really good ability. You kind of want to keep that in play for a decent chunk of the game and not get Torterra into play, so you can go in with Bramble Gas in the meantime. Even though it won't have as much HP early on, it still will have a decent amount. Another insane grass Pokemon here is Rabsca. Its ability, Spherical Shield, prevent all damage and effects done to your bench Pokemon from attacks by your opponent's Pokemon. This is the same as Machoke, or I don't, is it the same as Machoke? Um, it might not be technically the same. Let me find it. Okay, this stops damage counters, and so this doesn't stop other effects of attacks. I don't really know what those would be, but Rabsca will stop any effects of attacks and damage. So this is obviously good. There is no bench barrier for grass, at least in the form of a Pokemon. There are cards like Sky Pillar as well as Mountain Ring. I think Sky Pillar is the right card, and those are bench barrier, but they're stadiums. This is on obviously stage 1, which is a little awkward, but it's not that awkward. I mean, it's still pretty easy to get into play, and you know, it gives you a lot of bench protection, right? If your opponent's playing spread, if they're playing a Pokemon like Sableye, Blacephalon, I think I recently talked about those. Those are really good. This will stop that. Done to your bench, not to your active, but to your bench, which is obviously really good. And I don't know how concerned Grass is about spread because you do have a lot of HP, like high HP Pokemon and healing and stuff, but it's still a really nice addition. You don't have to play it, but you can, and it's good. Next, we have this Rrap Dash, which isn't very good. We got my favorite Pokemon, Slugma. We do have this Magcargo. Whenever your opponent's active moves to the bench, the new active is now burned. If you're playing Fire Burn, you could play this. One, I don't think that's super good. I don't know too much about it, but I don't think it's that good. I don't know too much about it because it has not been played too much. But yeah, but then there's this other Magcargo. This other Magcargo is like super good. It lets you search your deck for any card and put it on top of your deck every single turn. Then you do have ways to draw. This deck does run Delphox. That's not usually played, or not always played, but there's Salazzle as well, which is played a decent amount. It's not played a ton, but obviously there are cards that like draw a card or two. And that's not that uncommon. I promise some lists play Salazzle. They're out there somewhere. There are lots of cards that draw though. Um, yeah. Anyway, so that Magcargo is really good. And like pretty much all these play that main character, even if they don't play ways to draw it immediately, or if they don't play Salazzle, but they still I mean, pretty much this main character probably isn't good enough, even if you are playing a burn-based fire deck, but it is an option. Flippity Flap, fun little attack, but not the best. You'd have burn way to discard special energy, but doesn't seem particularly good. This Heatmore Lick, not particularly good. There's a good Heatmore that's kind of situational, but yeah, this Heatmore exists. Litten, Torcat, nothing insane here, and then Incineroar, Axe, Turtonator. You can do some snipe, 40 snipe, but it's not that good. I think it's directly less than the Ho-Oh. Let me check. Yeah, that's a 50 snipe. So yeah, this is not. Oh, and this has to be to the bench, so this isn't great. And has the same weakness, so this Turtonator is essentially directly worse. Yeah, Senna Scorch. This is interesting for Fire. Fire, you do 180 for 2, and then but only if your opponent's active is burned. So again, this obviously works with Fire Burn. There's a Senna Scorch that works with Fire Burn. I think, yeah, this one that will say that they don't recover if they flip heads. There's also the Senna Scorch, but it's a very different type of card. But pretty much, this is interesting. This is really interesting. Obviously, it's a good damage output. Decent HP, 140 is certainly not bad by any means on stage 1, and in 180 damage for 2 is really good. I think the Sense Scourge definitely has potential to be a really good attacker. It's obviously not like broken because it does take some setup. You need to burn your opponent, but there are ways of doing that. Fire Burn is a deck that you can play. It's not necessarily the best way to play Fire, but this is an option in that. Next up, we have Water, and we have this Insane for Alligator. I don't think there's a particularly strong for Alligator in Water. There is one for Alligator that like you can play, but it's not that good. But its ability here, Torrential Heart. Once your turn, you would put 5 damage counters on this Pokemon. If you do, this Pokemon's attacks do 120 more to your opponent's active. And then you have Giant Wave, which does 160 for Water. Water. The big issue is you can't really stream this. I'm not sure if it's quite powerful enough. In terms of damage, it's definitely powerful enough, but in terms of like tankiness and reliability for a stage 2, I don't know if it's quite there. But it's a really powerful Pokemon, so you got to consider playing it because of it just pure power. Its tankiness isn't amazing, but hitting 280 for 2 on a stage 2 is a lot of damage. It's not going to be looking like Torterra because it is the self-damaging attacker. It's not very tanky, but it does hit really hard, and it's pretty powerful. Sharpedo, this one's kind of interesting. By the way, for 2 colorless, you flip 3 coins for each heads, discard a random card for your opponent's hand, and you do also do 50. I don't think this is quite good enough. Water control isn't really a thing. But yeah, Sharpedo is an interesting option here. Keldeo not particularly good. He can draw 2 and hit 20, which isn't terrible. Potentially useful in certain scenarios. Potentially very good in certain scenarios, but pretty niche. And then we have a good old Snom, not a very good Snom, but yeah. And then we have this interesting Frostmoth, which for 2 water hits 100 during your opponent's next turn. The defending Pokemon cannot attack, except of course there is a very good Frostmoth from Sword and Shield. Does this one? Yeah, it does play it. I mean, it just lets you accelerate a ton of water energy. It's really good. So I don't think you'll play this Frostmoth, but you could. It can be super annoying. It can just win you the game late game, or like really, it can buy you that extra turn, or even potentially multiple turns in certain scenarios. And that's really good. Your opponent can switch out a lot of the time, but not all the time. There's a lot of things going on here. Not 100% sure how I feel about it, but I don't think it's that good. We got ourselves a good old Wiglet. Got ourselves a Palafin as well. This one's kind of interesting. Vanguard Punch does 130 for 1 water on stage 1. You have 150 HP, which is pretty tanky. But Vanguard Punch here, you do 10 damage to yourself for each damage counter on it. So you double the damage on you. That is potentially a big problem, obviously, because you're damaging yourself a lot. I mean, if you're hit into, you're going to get knocked out next turn by yourself. But the damage is pretty efficient here. There's also the other Palafin, which is really good in my opinion. Although you kind of need to build around it a little bit. I think it's this one. Also, I've gotten lots of views from this card, so I like it. But Justice Kick does 210 for 2 water if you swing to the active, or you do have Jet Punch third to the active, third to one of the bench. It's a really good attacker. Palafin, this other Palafin, the new one, does have another attack, double hit 90 for each heads. You flip 2 coins for water colorless. Not terrible, but not particularly good. But yeah, I think this other Palafin's better. They're not quite comparable, but if you're looking for a 1 energy attacker, obviously this one's better. But I do think this one's better, the older one. So yeah. Next up, we have Lightning. We do have a Raichu, which does 50 to each other Pokemon in play with damage counters on it for Lightning and Colorless, and it does damage to your own Pokemon. It's really, really bizarre. Um, yeah, I don't really know about this Pokemon. It's kind of interesting. Lightning Spread is a deck, though. I don't actually hate this card. It is only 2 energy, comparing it to something like the Electivire. I'm sure I can find it somewhere. Within Lightning Spread, it's pretty good. Although Lightning Spread isn't Spread isn't the most popular way to play Lightning, or rather, there is a Raikou Amazing Rare, which does kind of control the form, control Lightning a little bit. I'm sure there are some lists that don't run it, and if they don't, they are probably going to be running this the Electric. I'll just pull it up from Brilliant Stars. It does 50 to each of your opponent's Pokemon, which is good, but it is 3. I think the potential to KO your own Pokemon is kind of not great. Obviously, you do have Electric Ball, which is not terrible. I don't know. I don't think this card is awful. There are some good Raichus as well. There are a bunch that are pretty solid. There isn't a Alolan Raichu. You can actually play both Raichu and Alolan Raichu, although obviously they can't really be in play at the same time because they both evolve from the singular Pikachu. But overall, I do think it's a pretty cool card. By no means broken. I don't even know if it's good, but it's interesting. Speaking of Electivire, if your opponent has any water Pokemon in play, there's sorry if you can hear noise outside. But this does 160 if your opponent has any water Pokemon in play. But I mean, water is a stronger type than lightning, but you do hit them for weakness. Let's see the matchups. Only 5 matches have been played. I don't know. You could play this obviously if you are scared of water, but it's not even insane. It is 160 for 2, which is more than 1. So I probably would not play this Pokemon, but it is technically an option, and against water is pretty good. Like, well, you can't really play this. It's pretty terrible. You do 80 more feature bench charge of so that means you somehow need to get because you can't get Vikeville into play without like some weird way to cheat into play. But then you also can't get the Charge Bug into play without some weird way of cheating into play. So you need to cheat them both into play. Well, you can do 200 for 2. You can at 120 for 2. But let's be honest, this card you can't really play without some crazy shenanigans. So yeah. We do have Zera Orva, which does 20 on a 20 in paralysis on a coin flip, and 120. Pretty generic here. Bolton. This is kind of interesting. I actually think this is potentially decent. Electrifying Dash, 50 for 1 color. Search deck for up to 2 basic lightning and attach them to your bench in any way you like. This is not terrible by any means to set up a little bit and also poke your opponent's Pokemon. Provide a little bit of pressure while also, improving your board state, saying to your opponent, you need to make the move or I'll just keep sitting here and gaining a lot of resources and it's only 1 energy on a stage 1. That's probably getting one-shotted because it is a stage 1 and it's not super high HP. If you can get the value out of it, it's pretty good, but obviously you'll miss. You can do this with like Raikou Amazing Rare, which I mentioned, which obviously it's good. And powering that up is good, so you do have that option there. Well, Trio EX, a fun Pokemon, not good here. Iron Hands, also not good here. Iron Thorns, also not good here. Moving on to, I guess, the last type of today's video is going to be Psychic with Mr. Mime. You can use one of your opponent's supporters in their hand as an attack. That's not very good. You have Azumarill. Again, not too great. You can do 140 for 3, which isn't terrible, but not amazing. Girafarig, 20, 10 more for each damage counter on your opponent's active. This exists so much in Psychic. Latios can draw 2, but pretty generic. But now we get to Bronzong. This card is pretty crazy. Evolution Jammer. Your opponent can't play any Pokemon from their hand to evolve their Pokemon next turn. This can destroy some decks because stopping evolutions is insane. Obviously, once they get evolved, you're not stopping them because they've already done it. But stopping this before it happens is just so insane. And if you can pull this off, I mean, you can just win certain matchups. Looking at a lot of decks, like Psychic has a decent amount of evolutions, but also a decent amount of basics. So you can't just rely on stopping evolutions or against, I guess, water. I should go to a type that's not Psychic. This deck is very focused on evolutions. If they can't use evolutions, I think, yeah, this deck, literally every Pokemon, except for this Wishy-Washy, evolves, which is pretty insane. But then they do have these options. So this is kind of interesting. I don't know if it's quite good enough, but it's really powerful. I don't think there's another Bronzong that's really played. I don't even know what they literally wait. Is this the first Psychic Bronzong ever, or at least within like the modern era? I think it might be. Okay, well, yeah, I guess there isn't any competition. So this is really good, and there is a Psychic Bronzor. Um, so yeah, this is pretty good. Also, this attack does 40 for one Psychic to another Psychic, which is pretty interesting, meaning that you can one-shot certain basics. But anyways, this is a pretty insane attack in certain scenarios, and I think it's a really great tech option, especially in a disruptive style deck. You can pair this with like Garbodor and I don't know, other psychic disruption stuff. And it's like psychic can be a pretty annoying type to have to deal with. And once you have to deal with Bronzong, this can auto win if you're able to get set up before your opponent sets up. There are some ways to cheat into play. There are actually a few. I think there's a Wally and a pseudo Wally reprint, which we'll talk about. That's pretty good. So I think this card will see a bunch of play. It's good. I don't know if it has perfect synergy with Psychic, but it's a very powerful card. Next up, we do have this Reuniclus. This one is super wacky. Summoning Gate. Look at the top 8 cards of your deck and put the Pokemon you find there onto your bench. Then shuffle the cards back to your deck in any order. And you don't have to put all the Pokemon there. This is really good because this allows you to cheat other Psychic Pokemon into play. From this set, are there any you can't get into play normally? Looks like no, but there are certainly some Psychic Pokemon that you can't really get into play. I know there are other types. I'm assuming there are in Psychic. I can't think of like Espeon. I guess if you want to play Espeon for whatever reason, although I don't think there's a very good Espeon. Uh, nah, nothing insane here, but you could get that into play. And there are a lot of a decent amount of Pokemon like this. Also, this does get other stage 2s into play. There's an Orbeetle or other Pokemon, including stage 2s or stage 1s or basics, but it's not great for basics. You can just play them. But this is really interesting. It's also really slow, so that's a big problem. And also there's a few, or at least one pretty decent Reuniclus. Um, so yeah, I don't think this is quite good enough. It is really interesting though, and as I said, there are ways to cheat Pokemon to play. This is one that obviously works for Psychic. Not amazing, but can be interesting if you want to pull off some really spicy combos. Next up, we have Beheeyem, 20 free Pokemon, which would be Psychic Pokemon you have in play. So that means that that's 120 for one Psychic on a stage 1, which is not terrible actually. There is another good or a really interesting Beheeyem, which is this one that is, well, there's this one, which is okay. It's actually pretty good. And then I guess there's this one, which is a spread Pokemon. But then there's this one that's like item lock. So there's a bunch of pretty decent Beheeyem. Is this one good enough? No. I mean, it's not better than the other ones, but it's not worse. I think it could be, you could play this. It's certainly not a bad card. Nothing insane though. Now, I guess to this Rabambi with business, I kind of hate that. Oh, business wages. It does 30, but if the defending Pokemon is knocked out during your next turn, you take 2 more prizes. Of course, your opponent probably will not want that to happen and will probably be able to stop that from happening. Not super easily, but they will be able to stop it. They can just like retreat. So, um, yeah, I don't think this is very good. Obviously, it's not that hard to knock them out, but they need to be like stuck. This can force out switches, can be used to like really annoy your opponent. I think there's some potential, but I don't think it's quite enough at all. Screamtail is bad. Fluttermane is interesting. If it's in the active, your opponent's active has no abilities. I guess it's not that interesting. Its attack is okay and it's usable, but Wobbuffet it turns off all their abilities and doesn't turn off your abilities unless you play some non-psychic Pokemon somehow. Uh, But yeah, Fluttermane will turn off your opponent's active. If you really want ability lock and you already play Garbodor and Wobbuffet, you could play this, but I don't think it's really useful. Lastly, we have 2 Iron Valiants. This one, if you play as Future Supporter, you do for Psychic Colorless to hit 200. This is kind of interesting. The 2 Psychic Supporters, Cryptomaniac's Deciphering and Professor Terra's Scenario, are both pretty decent. Well, Professor Terra's Scenario is not that good. Cryptomaniac's Deciphering is pretty good, especially with some of the Psychic Engine stuff we have with like Zato, but more importantly, Curlier/Gallade. And so that's pretty good, but it's nothing insane. I'd rather play like there's a Mewtwo that's pretty good, and there's a Necrozma that's pretty decent as well. Arguably better than the Mewtwo. Yeah, I wouldn't play this Iron Valiant. And this other one, it does 120 for 3 Psychic, Psychic Colorless, or Twin Lasers, 20 to the active, 20 to 1 to the bench. Yeah, nothing too special here. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I guess I'll do 2 more coming up in the future. One covering Fighting, Darkness, Metal, Colorless, and Dragon, which are smaller types, but do have some pretty good stuff. Then the third video will, of course, be on the trainers, or I may lump them together because there are a lot of A-spec trainers which you just can't play, and some reprints. So I might lump those two together. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, consider subscribing. I'm getting close to 1,000, or I've passed it, but I don't think that'll have happened by the time this video is out. But I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to be, as I said, doing some more GLC content, and I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you are too. Also, more Temporal Forces content. And as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.